Now that EF Core 6 is in the project, I can go ahead and build a data model to drive the persistence of my books and authors into the SQL Server database that I'll be using. I'll overwrite the class file that was created with the project. I'll name the class pubcontext because it will be using EF Core's dbContext class. And the class needs to inherit from EF Core's dbContext. Visual Studio recognizes that dbContext is part of the Microsoft Entity Framework Core namespace that's already part of the app, so it automatically puts the using statement up there. The dbContext provides all of the logic that EF Core is going to be using to do its change tracking and database interaction tasks. And for those of you who've been using EF6 and haven't yet seen any version of EF Core, I do hope you already feel a sense of relief in seeing the beginning of how similar EF Core is to Entity Framework 6. A dbContext needs to expose DB sets, which become wrappers to the different types that you'll be interacting with while you're using the context. The first DB set that I want to create is a DB set of author type, and I'll call that authors. Visual Studio makes it easy to discover and fix needed references. The data project does need to reference the publisher domain, and I'll use the quick action again to easily add the reference to the project. At the same time, Visual Studio also adds the using statement for a publisher domain because it knows that I need that as well. Here you can see that the project reference has been added to the CSproj file. I'll also add in a DB set for the book and rename the class file to pubcontext. How you define your DB context is important to how Entity Framework Core treats your data at runtime, as well as how it's able to interact with the database, and it can define how you use the model in your coding. Because I've exposed both of these DB sets, I'll be able to directly query the authors or the books in my code. The DB context also affects how EF Core infers the database schema, whether you're working with an existing database or you're going to let EF Core create the database using this model. For example, EF Core will presume, by its conventions, that the table names match the DB set names. There's a lot you can do to affect how EF Core infers that model at runtime as it reads the DB context and any other information you might provide. But for now, I'll just stick with EF Core's defaults, given that I've already made it aware of the author and the book. Further on in this course, I'll provide you with more information about defining and customizing the DB context, and I'll give you some tips and tricks on taking more control over how EF Core interprets your data model by way of this context. This is all EF Core needs to know about the classes it's going to be interacting with, but we still have to let it know about the database.